If you're starting out in woodworking, you probably watched a bunch of videos where master woodworkers are making these crazy complex crosscut sleds. In this video, I won't be doing that. When I use my crosscut sled, it's pretty much just to make a crosscut. That's it. So I designed a bare bones mini crosscut sled with everything you need and nothing you don't. This keeps the sled small, lightweight, cheap, and easy to build. I even designed the sled to make quick crosscuts on this side and perfect 45-degree bevels on the other side. Throughout this entire video, I'll be following the plans that I made. I do this to make sure my plans make sense and are easy to follow. If you'd like to get some of these plans for yourself, look down below. I'm going to use 3/4 inch plywood for this entire build. It's nice and strong and relatively dimensionally stable. Most will say Baltic birch is good because it's high quality and has less voids. I'm going to use whatever this is because it's what I have. I'll start by following my cut list and my plans to cut all the pieces to size on my table saw and miter saw. I'll be cutting the base, 2 pieces for the fence, and 2 small pieces for the safety block. To determine the width of the base, I measured the distance between the 2 miter slots and then added 1 3/4 inch. This takes into account the width of the miter guide rail and leaves a little extra on each end that will be trimmed off on the first test pass. I wanted the fence to be a few inches longer than the base so do a better job supporting the workpiece. Once all the pieces are cut, I'll grab the 2 long pieces and glue them together to make the fence. To ensure it's nice and flat, I'll use a known straight edge when clamping it up. I'll also glue and clamp the 2 smaller pieces that will make up the safety block. And now for the miter guide rail. This sled only uses 1 guide. The miter guide rail rides in the miter slot and is very important to the accuracy of the sled. Personally, I like using these pre-made UHMW guide rails. They fit perfectly, they're super slippery, and have countersunk holes pre-drilled in them to secure them to the bottom of the sled. They even come with screws. If you want these, I put a link down below. However, you can also make these for yourself out of plywood. You'll want to cut the pieces so they just barely fit in the miter slot and can slide freely. They should sit just below the table saw surface. Mine need to be about 3/8 inch thick. You'll also want to pre-drill some countersunk holes in them. I'm going to use the table saw fence to roughly square up the base as well as locate it where I want it on the guide rail. I'm going to set my fence about 1/4 inch away from the blade and then move the blade down into the saw for now. Now I'm going to put some washers in the left miter slot and then place the guide rail in the slot. The washers should put the guide rail just above the table saw surface. I'll offset it by about 1/4 inch from the edge of the table, which is where I want it to be on the base. Next, I'm going to temporarily glue the rail to the base. So I'm going to put some masking tape on the table on both sides of the slot to protect the table from glue. Now apply CA glue to the rail and accelerator to the base. Push it up against the fence, line it up with the edge of the table, and lay it down. Apply pressure for about 30 seconds and then lift it off the table. Now secure the guide to the base with the screws included in the UHMW guide rail. If you made your own, you'll need to pre-drill some countersunk holes before installing the screws. Make sure the screws are flush on the bottom and don't poke through on the top. Now I'll put the sled back in the miter slot and make a cut to remove the excess base material. Next, I'll grab the fence assembly made earlier and clean up the edges on the table saw. I'll also add a very small chamfer to this edge, which will be used to capture small amounts of dust so it doesn't interfere with the accuracy of the cuts. Then I'll clamp down the fence 1 1/2 inches from the back edge and install a single countersunk screw. Like I said earlier, the fence will hang off one side to help support the workpiece. The fence will need to be squared up with the edge I cut earlier. Then I can install 1 more screw to hold it all in place. Don't use any wood glue on the fence in case you want to make an adjustment later. The screws need to be countersunk so they don't rub on the table when using the sled. Now I'll grab my safety block I made earlier and clean up the edges on the table saw. Then I'll glue it to the back of the fence with CA glue. It should be centered over the blade. Make sure you only glue it to the fence and not the base. If you glue it to both surfaces, you won't be able to make adjustments to the fence later. The sled is pretty much done, but the last thing I need to do is put it in the other miter slot, set the blade to 45 degrees, and cut off the excess on the bevel cut side. Finally, I waxed the bottom of the sled to ensure smooth operation and then tested it out. First, I tested the sled's ability to make a nice square cross cut. Then I moved it over to the other side, set the table saw to 45 degrees, and made a nice bevel cut. The sled made perfect cross cuts as well as 45-degree bevel cuts. If your sled is off, just remove one of the screws, make an adjustment, and then put a screw in a new hole. Once you're happy, add 2 more screws to make sure the fence is fully secured to the base. Now that is a simple crosscut sled. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe. It really helps out my channel. Once you're done with all that, have a look at some of these other awesome videos up here, and we'll see you guys in the next one.